The resolution supporting the Bridge Fest 5K has been pulled from the agenda indefinitely at the request of the applicant. So, want to let everybody know that. With that, I'm going to meet you down there at the podium already. Yeah, up here.
How are you?
Well, I'm going to read a proclamation regarding your hard work and regarding Black History Month. Whereas Black History Month affords a special opportunity to become more knowledgeable about the many accomplishments among people of color, and to honor the leaders who overcame adversity to greatly contribute to the advancement of our nation. And whereas such knowledge can strengthen the insight of all our citizens regarding the issues of human rights, the great strides that have been made in the crusade to eliminate the barriers of equality for minority groups, and the continuing struggle against racial discrimination and poverty. And whereas 6th grade students of Park Maitland School, under the art instruction of Sandy Boda, NAEA, created original artwork to honor generations of prominent people of color with the display All Shades United. And whereas the pastel portraits the students created will be displayed in the Maitland City Council chambers for the month of February in recognition and celebration of Black History Month. Now, therefore, I, John Lowndes, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of the city of Maitland, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2022 as Black History Month in the city of Maitland, and urge all residents to join me in this special service. Well, I would like to say a few words, but I would just like to say this is really an incredible thing that you all put together. Looking forward to looking at it all month and coming in and seeing it up close and personal.
Thank you very much. The first thing I want to say is, you said my hard work, and it's not my hard work by any means. It's the students' hard work and the staff who are here as well. So, Park Maitland is honored to be involved in events to honor Black History Month and people who have made significant contributions to history in our society. Our talented 6th graders worked hard on these pieces of art, honoring individuals who made these significant contributions to our society. Park Maitland is steadfast in ensuring that all students and staff are treated equally with respect, are good to their fellow peers, teachers, and community. Park Maitland celebrates and exposes students to inclusion, culture, and celebrates diversity daily. This is why Black History Month is so important and celebrated in multiple ways at Park Maitland. Also want to give a special thanks to Ms. Bonus, who is a teacher. 27 years. So the school, I know everybody is well aware, is 53 years old, and I know for a fact that if Ms. Cohen, who is the founder of the school, was here today, she would be extremely proud of these students and Ms. Bonus. So, thank you.
Well, I think with that, we'll get on with our agenda this evening. Thank you again to Park Maitland and all the students who produced this great artwork for us. First item is old business. City manager, what do we have in old business?
You do not have any this time?
Okay. Get a little breather here while people file out.
Sandy, great job by everybody.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, well, under old business, we do have an item that we continued from the last meeting, with the comprehensive development plan amendment to remove prohibition of drive-through use on lot 1, Maitland Concourse North. We're resuming this for discussion purposes of council. I think we've already closed the public period, and I think the applicant has had their opportunity as well. But Dan, if you could reorient us as to where we are with this. And this is, again, this is for the first reading. If it is successful tonight, we'll carry it forward to a second reading and adoption later.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Just as a recap, so since the January 24th meeting, Council did continue this case. In that time, the applicant had met with the staff and had heard what Council was saying at that meeting. So they met with the staff and they had decided to further restrict their request for the comp plan amendment by limiting Lot 1 to a maximum of 2 drive-through uses, limiting the cumulative size of the drive-through uses to a maximum of 10,000 square feet, and limiting the location of drive-through uses to the western 500 feet of Lot 1. So basically what the new request would say is that commercial uses within the MORC category shall not include big box retail drive-through establishments of any kind, except that 2 drive-through establishments with a cumulative interior square footage that shall not exceed 10,000 square feet may be allowed on the west 500 feet of Lot 1. The applicant is here to answer any questions should there need any, but again tonight we are just voting on whether to introduce this case and have a public hearing. Staff is recommending that council introduce the proposed amendment and set a public hearing date should they do so for February 28th.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Does anybody have any questions of Dan or any discussion before we move to the motion?
Yeah, I have an idea I just wanted to throw out for discussion, throw it against the wall, see if it sticks. You know, maybe throw it out, somebody here would have another better idea to work on it with. But after the last meeting, I asked Dan to do the site plans for me. And one of the things that I've learned on the site plan is on lots 1 and 2 that we can, if they can have 65 to 85,000 square feet. So what I'd like to propose is that maybe give them the other 10,000 that lot 2 has in use. Instead of doing drive-throughs, they would have more buildability with square footage. It would still be 150,000 square feet used on the 2 lots, other than letting that other 10,000 square feet sit there unused for 20, 30 years until somebody wants to redevelop it.
Just in that scenario, the 10,000 feet is on lot 2 that you're supposed to?
Well, between the 2 of them, you get 150,000 square feet of building space, correct, Dan? So how we had it was 75 and 75, but when lot 2 did theirs, they only used 65,000 square feet. That leaves 10. So my suggestion is instead of drive-throughs, we'd offer the other 10,000, so he could build more of a village-style project. So that's what I wanted to throw out, see if there's any want by the applicant to do that, or by us, or whatever, but I just wanted to start that conversation.
Dan can probably, I don't think we can do that. I don't know that
other lot. We haven't set up a matrix, from my understanding, from the way this PD was set up, there isn't a sharing of entitlement program. And so I don't know how that would.
Well, that's why I was reading it on the 85,000 because.
There's a couple things. There are two different owners.
Right.
So you got two different owners. You have to get. I think there's a several layers of this that pose problems that I don't think it's feasible, and I do not think it's probably up to us to make that call. It's not something I don't think we could do. It would be a more complicated process, and I'm not sure that the mechanisms are in place to even do it.
If I may, Mayor, there's a lot of different parts to this, and I'm generally in favor of creative thinking. So for that, Councilman Guthrie, I think congratulations. But here's the reality: the applicant, as I said last time, is entitled to vote on what it wants. It only withdrew for continuance the idea of what it wanted, which was 3 drive-throughs, to go back and talk to the client and see what the client was willing to do less than 3. And what they've come up with, I still don't know. But they still have the same entitlement at the last meeting they do this time, and that is to get a vote up or down on their application. If, for example, let's just speculate that they would say, hey, that's an interesting idea. Here are the other layers. It hasn't been to P&Z, as far as I know, with that suggestion. And this body, notwithstanding what its code says, always wants, in past history, the different P&Z on what that means. And the reasons for that are the impacts that we can't determine. If you went to that much commercial and somehow this was able to work, has anyone looked at it in terms of the parking? Has anybody looked at it in terms of traffic flow? Has it, again, given the idea that part of the issue with the drive-throughs was concern about traffic backup that would then cause a blockage, would that also contribute to that? And it may not. Mr. Tate's here, he's an engineer, he can maybe tell you, but I don't know if he can tell you tonight.
So that's a PD amendment, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
have to go back through the process.
So while you in theory could say, the heck with all that, we'll negotiate it right here at the podium, it would be my strong advice to you that's not wise. And it would certainly be a bad precedent to set, because it would mean that every time somebody came with a project, one that they actually applied for and are wanting to get approved, would be ready to have to potentially negotiate it. Maybe that works out, but maybe it works out into a disaster because we didn't have the chance to vet it the way everything else has been. This project, the idea of intending for these drive-throughs, not saying it's a good idea or a bad idea, I don't know. That's a policy thing. But what I do know is it has been vetted, and if this goes forward tonight, it will continue to be vetted. Whereas if we went on this project that we're talking about, or some new version, we kind of got to go back to square one, or some version of square one. So that would be my input.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I already, and I'm sorry I didn't share that in my thoughts, but that was my thought. It had to go back through the PD amendment process, and it had to go back through P&Z.
I think we are pretty clear at this point that the applicant intends to either proceed with the application he has made, or he's going to build on what he's already entitled to. So I don't know that any additional delays by going back to P&Z to try and rework a whole new project, which sounds from Cliff's assessment to be quite involved, and requiring multiple landowners to come to an agreement on moving entitlements back and forth, as Mike is saying. I don't know that we're going to be able to convince the landowner that he wants to hang around and wait for us to think about it for a long time.
Well, I hate to be the guy that it's easy to say no or yes, but the hard thing is to come up with an alternative, and that's what I was trying to do, because the answer is always no until you ask the question. So until then, maybe that wasn't even a thought by the applicant. So I wanted to bring something, new idea that would be a win-win for everybody. That was my thought.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I just want to get back to, so if we introduce this and set the public hearing for February 28th, how much more detailed information would we get from the applicant as far as stacking, as far as sidewalks, pedestrian, whatever? How much more detailed information would we have to make a decision at that point?
So if you hold a public hearing for February 28th, it'll be just that, a public hearing, it'll be a new presentation. If there are certain things you want to see that come out of that presentation that answer some of the questions that are of concerns, we can absolutely, and the applicants here, they're hearing what you say and can formulate their...
So at the last meeting, we talked about, because Mr. Wild kind of wanted them to tone this down and come back, and they did that with two drive-throughs instead of 3, and with isolating them on the western end of the site, which, if you look at Google Earth, is about a quarter mile from the condo. So if this is a matter of people driving west on Maitland Boulevard in the morning and pulling in there and getting in the queue and getting their coffee and getting back out and continuing west on Maitland Boulevard, that's a pretty contained situation. So I don't see a spillover effect from that. If they can prove that they'll be able to control all the stacking on their site, and so that's the kind of information that I would like to see. As far as traffic flow, and then the two drive-throughs I assume would be the right there on the corner, and then the next lot to the east of it. And those be so if you can just kind of, and this is where the issues are going to be in the morning. People going west on Maitland Boulevard and go, I want to get a cup of coffee, and so they'll turn right, and then they'll get their cup of coffee, and then they'll go back to Trulago Way and turn right at there. So to me, that it doesn't affect. I don't see how that affects anybody outside that little setting there where the restaurant is. So that's the kind of information I'd like to see, and I think it'd be worth considering. And alleviate the concerns about backup traffic and affecting other areas outside that one little area. So with that, I'll pass the torch.
Well, Vance, to your point, I appreciate you also raising that and thinking outside the box there. I guess really it would be in the applicant's court as to whether or not they wanted to do that and take it over. Now they've heard the idea, if they would have to be the one to drive that back. It's up to them, I guess, at this point. Just like it was in the last to continue it. Is there any further discussion on the new?
I think there's
You go ahead.
all right. So I think the issue, one of the issues we're having here is that we're trying to envision a site plan and comment on the site plan that doesn't exist and is premature at this point based on a comp plan that hasn't been amended, right? So this is step one, and I think one of the issues, Dan, that sort of we're struggling with a little bit is that we're all trying to envision of what comes of this future land use amendment. So we allow this. I think we're sort of skipping ahead in our minds and our discussion as to what the eventual site plan looks like. And I think that the issues to me are if we change the current comp plan amendment, there's talk about how this new site plan that would come out of it is better. That it's an improvement because of other things. But in reality, they could come back, unless we prescribed it, they could come back with the exact same site plan and just put one drive-through or two drive-throughs on the map and still have buildings that are back against the, I mean, am I right or wrong? I mean, there's nothing in this that's saying that the eventual site plan has to look any different than it looks now, just with the drive-through added.
There's nothing specific to say now, but what we can do is if it comes back on the 28th, we can spend more time on the proposed layout of the PD. Now, the PD is still very early in getting molded right now, so I think if that helps alleviate some of the concerns, we can show you the site plan, or the PD plan, but take that with a little bit knowing that it's still being molded by staff, and when it comes to you for an actual PD vote, there may be some changes.
So what I think my thought is here, if we want to see that changes are made that we think make the project an improvement or help alleviate the concerns of the drive-through, those have to be spelled out in listing. We have to set them out. We have to, if there's concerns that say we would only want drive-throughs if X, Y, and Z happen, I think that it potentially is too late to then say later in the PD. I think if there are things that we are focused on, and Cliff and I talked briefly at the end of the last meeting about whether or not how to write the right terminology to use. But I think if there are things just like this where we want to say it has to be on the west 500 feet, if there are other things that need to happen in order for the group to feel like drive-throughs are okay, I think the time is now to do that. I don't know, Cliff, if that's...
I think that's accurate, at least as a starting point, which will be more finely developed as we get a site plan. But I think unless Dan has something more, and again, obviously Mayor runs the meeting, but maybe we should hear what the applicant has come up with, having heard our input last time, or your input last time, and see what they say. They may say the west doesn't work for us. They may say, sounds great to us. I don't know, because I haven't heard anything since the last meeting. So unless y'all know more than me, which is undoubtedly true, I don't know what they are willing to do, but they might be some of those questions we answer when we hear about them.
Well, I'm reluctant to open it back up to that. I mean, I think that, Dan, isn't it the case that this is language that you worked with the applicant on? Because the west 500 feet, the 10,000 foot limitation, and I mean, this was not your idea.
No, this was the applicant's.
I apologize.
Yeah, no, I assume that's the case. So, but Mr. Wild, what you're asking is that you'd like to see more parameters on that at this point, because you don't want to get to the point where you...
So let's just say that, I think, Dan, an improvement was not seeing this sea of parking. Or maybe it was the applicant, I don't want to, but there was a presentation showing a site plan where the sea of parking was not a sea of parking, and the buildings were closer to 414, and that helped out the walkability. There was an improvement of walkability, but none of that is really any kind of a guarantee. It's sort of showing you, hey, this could be what it could be, but it could also be something completely different unless the key elements of that plan we prescribe at the comp plan stage. That's I think my point is to say, if there are things that this group feels are necessities in order to approve this, the time is now. And I think we discussed more than just, I think, those three things. Maybe this is all that they're willing to give on, and maybe that is what it is, and we vote, because as I said, you vote up and down on this, and they're entitled to vote on this. But I don't think that's what I've been hearing. I think there were concerns by the residents. We were trying to listen, and I think that the issue is, are there the things in that site plan that we want to set forth to add to those three bullet points?
And I think if this moves forward to the public hearing, then the applicant will present more of the contrast between what is allowed by right entitlements now versus what they're proposing. And that, sometimes you take the comp plan amendment and the PD through at the same time. In this case, the drawing of the PD is going to be expensive. There's going to be a lot of engineering involved in it. And so the applicant wanted to know, is this even a possibility before we start spending a lot of money? So that's why they took the route of going the comp plan first, just to see if that's even something that they're open to before they start spending the money. The PD will follow right behind it if it does get approved and moved forward. And so if this goes forward to the 28th as a public hearing, we can make sure that staff as well as the applicant kind of outline the differences between the Poloni plan and the proposed plan, just so you can get a sense of what the differences are and how that changes.
I understand. I think my point is to say, whenever we vote on this, if it gets to that vote, I would want to make sure that the things that we are concerned about get put in this. That it draws the roadmap for what is to come down the road. It doesn't obviously, it's not going to be as specific as the PD and the site plan will eventually be, but it should at least set forth the major points, I think. There's 3 major points that are listed, but I think there are probably more than 3.
Yeah, I think if I can paraphrase what I think you're saying is that this is, you want to see what the get is as opposed to just the give. This is all give right here. We're just giving, a drive-through. We're not getting back the improvements kind of closer, shrinking the parking lot and everything else, which is really more of a graphic description. It's kind of difficult to do a graphic description, I think, in a comp plan amendment that is very textual. This thing is less than a well-constructed sentence. So, but I back to that point. I mean, I guess it would all come out as the process goes on. But and those were the items that I thought that the applicant had raised those earlier as things where the restaurant industry was headed anyway, that these were all good planning ideas and you want to do that in any case. And if that's the case, I think we should bring that forward in any case and we'll not always seeing that change. But as it stands, I think we're not at that point yet. So I share that concern.
I think, go ahead.
It's just, you guys are far ahead of me on this stuff, but, so you're wanting more information that's in a than more detail than what might be in a normal comp plan amendment, but somewhere short of a site plan.
I'm not quite sure, and Cliff has probably seen sure more than any of us combined, but what is a normal comp plan and what would be a normal comp plan amendment is probably debatable, and depending on the jurisdiction, they approach things differently. So I mean, I personally,
listening to this, I would want to know before I voted for this, what the stacking is, how the cars are going to be contained. I'd like to know how people are going to walk from point A to point B. I'd like to see how traffic flow will go. I think I know how it will go because that's the way it makes sense. But is that, so if they came back with that information and then we can basically hold them to that?
So the difficulty with that, like that site plan level review,
well, I know
that we're not going to get at this point. So
but
you'd be looking at something that is hypothetical and that we really couldn't, to your last sentence or phrase, we couldn't hold them to it. We can only hold them to conceptuals that we would.
So could a conceptual be that they have to provide so much stacking? Could a conceptual be they have to provide so much more pedestrian access with one plan than the other?
And that's where the difficulty lies, is typically a comp plan is 30,000 foot level. It's not the detail of the kid. Now, if it does come back on the 28th and council decides, they can make it very clear if they approve it, if and when this comes back as a PD, these are the things that are very important to us that we want to make sure are incorporated in the PD. And that will be loud and clear to the applicant.
Dan, do you have a where the road, so off Charlotte Way, where that access point is into Lot 1? Do we have a sketch that shows that at all?
I believe we do. I think I'd probably have the applicant come up and talk about that once we start getting into the site plan.
And none of these lots are, everything in there is coming in as one lot, so it's from a nothing in there is individually platted as far as this point goes. It's all one
Correct.
big lot.
Correct.
So I mean, Mike, the issue is that you'd have to really design this in a strange way to not stack this all within the lot. But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't potentially congest interior roadways. But I think one of the issues is, based on our experience here, is that you would want to make sure that the turn into this lot 1 is far enough down trail out of the way that and then you're creating circulation inside. And I think that's something you could, I don't know, Cliff, is that 30,000 feet for a comp plan?
Well, it's really not that it's not 30,000 feet. You could argue that it is, but the problem is it's not our application, it's their application.
No, so I think what I'm trying to, and this is where I'm trying to get, and I think that the issue is we're in sort of this weird limbo land.
Yes,
right?
we are, and it is based on what has been said, and it is true, and I think Dan has capsulized. You know, in a lot of these situations, the comp plan rides with the zoning amendment, which would include all the things that you're now looking for, the details, if there was a DA or a development agreement, it would include a site, that would include things so that you could say, if we do this, we know it's coming with this, or else we're not going to do this. But this one's different, because before they get into the level of detail of planning of what a site would look like, which requires a lot of engineering, particularly when you're talking about accessories, they want to know that that's even a possibility to have a discussion. So what I think, if I can capture it accurately, it may not be, the level of concern, for example, from Mr. Thomas, understandably so, is that I don't want to say yes to drive-throughs and then be stuck in a quasi-judicial proceeding which requires evidence and so forth, which I do not know whether I will agree or disagree with the staff analysis, or whether or not I'll be happy with what they're telling me regarding safety from a traffic standpoint or a stacking standpoint of those things. And I don't know that I want to take it on faith that saying yes to drive-throughs in a general way at 30,000 foot is going to look the same when I'm faced with staff agrees that there's competent substantial evidence to support doing this way, when your instincts or other things, which you can't generally rely on in a quasi-judicial proceeding, tell you, no, that's not going to be good for Maitland. So I get all of that, but as it sits right now, unless they are writing this with an actual zoning change where the two things come hand in hand and you can watch them through the process, then I think this is where we are. And so you're right, those are important things, even if they are sort of below the 30,000 foot level. But the way to get there, unless it's our application, is to see if the applicant is willing to change the application to include some of those limitations, or otherwise they get a vote, and that's what they get.
Yeah, so I think, Mike, what I would say is that if this goes forward tonight, I think the issue is, I think we should tell staff what we would want to see, and then essentially the staff comes back with the ordinance on whatever date it's set, and then at that point it's a vote yes or no. But I think the time to voice the concern is now. So if, for example, one of the things I had thought about on the last one, and whether or not this makes the project better or worse, but that there not be a standalone drive-through, that they've done a maximum of 10,000 feet, but do you want to see that the drive-through, there's an interior seating and a minimum size to the building to which the drive-through is attached? Is that something we care or think makes a better drive-through or not? Your point about, obviously, you have to have internal stacking, but it would, again, unless they're individually platted, it would be hard to define that, because the stacking will always be internal. It would be, like I said, it would be a...
Let me ask this, Cliff. So, Dan, can you pull up the language, the actual language
Of the
ordinance, of the proposed amendment?
The proposed is right down here.
Okay. Fine for that. Okay. Right. This right here. So, Cliff, in the sense of entitlements, just for if you could educate us on this, if this were approved tonight and 2 weeks from now, what entitlements go with that land? Does this entitle the landowner to anything?
Well, in theory, it entitles them to, and I guess it sounds so stupid to say it, to what you see on this page, which is, it entitles them, in terms of the way that phrase is used, legally speaking, to two drive-throughs with a maximum square footage as set forth in space limitations. But it doesn't actually entitle them to those things under the code from a zoning perspective unless they can meet the other requirements. So if you think of it as in a comp plan versus zoning, the comp plan could say, yeah, in this area of zoning, you could put in apartments, but you still got to fit them on this size lot with all the setbacks and everything else that applies to site planning. And so if that means you could, in theory, do it, but in actuality, when it comes down to putting pen to paper or whatever they call it when you're drawing and you're an engineer, ink to plans, and they don't fit, they don't just say, well, the comp plan controls. That's not it. The only thing with comp plan zoning is the zoning can't conflict in a way that gives you more than what's in the comp plan. The comp plan is the ceiling, it ain't the floor. And so on the zoning part of it, they still have to meet whatever our code currently says regarding access, ingress, water, stormwater control, setbacks, all of those things. All of those will be part of it. So the only hairy issue is if, as has happened previously in the administration's past, the staff and the applicant were on the same page, but the decision makers up here were not on that page. And there was no other evidence to look at. Then you've got a problem.
Yeah, so that's where I was heading. I wanted to kind of highlight this just to show where we would be at that point. If we approve this language, and the applicant, the landowner comes forward at that point, anytime in the future, next week, next year, says, listen, this has, I can do 2 drive-throughs on this. I can fit them all in. I can do it right here. I can do this. Give you my drive-throughs, unless we have evidence that there is some reason that they can't. They have drive-throughs. There's little that we can do about that as long as we're meeting all the other requirements.
Yeah.
So we're kind of, the posture changes.
Yes,
At this
it
point,
absolutely.
this
That's
point is
the
absolute
legislative.
discretion. Yeah.
That's the difference between a legislative and a quasi-judicial decision. For no good reason other than you don't think it's a good idea, you could say no to this. And that's the ultimate authority, because this is a legislative decision. Whether it's a good idea or not, that's a different debate.
Right.
But you have that authority.
Right.
Once you get down into the zoning level, on a specific piece like this, then it's all about competent substantial evidence. And the staff can't tell you right now what their evidence will be, or what their review will reveal, because they haven't reviewed anything. And I don't think the applicant can tell you either, because they are trying to avoid those costs until they know they have something to plan for.
So I think what I hear Mr. Wild and Mr. Thomas both kind of saying is, let's get more, the more detail we have in this, the less rear guard action we have to take in future meetings, because we will be, the next few metaphors, more in the driver's seat than we would otherwise be, right? The more we have to.
Time is now.
And the problem is procedurally is, again, we're dealing with text amendment here to the comp plan. It's a sentence, and it's hard to kind of conceive and put into writing, or certainly I don't think we'd be able to do it graphically. Comp plan amendment, what we would like it to look like, is what are general conceptual. That's the problem.
Do we have confidence in our requirements and our staff's ability to follow those requirements to our wishes?
If we trust our staff, we do.
But that's, I don't think that's the question, Mr. Meek. So to me, if the issue is you want to see buildings closer to 414, then you've got to somehow, and John's right, exactly right. It's hard to write this. I do think that whatever comes out, it's probably best to not put this as I think we should try to put a little more text in than what we've attempted so far. I think this warrants a little bit more particulars, and I know.
I'm concerned about boxing ourselves in further, and the reason is because we've had a workshop. The applicant came and gave us a vision of what they wanted. We've seen a picture which holds nobody to anything, but it at least gives us an idea of what is being proposed. We've now had this has gone through P&Z, where another picture was depicted, which looked similar to the first one we saw in the workshop, where once again, the vision of the applicant was restated for the same ideas. We now have the applicant who has come back and has heard counsel from our last meeting and said 3 drive-throughs is too many. Let's reduce that down to 2. I understand that you want to keep the size of the spaces limited, so it's limited. And in addition, by limiting where the drive-throughs can be placed within the western 500 feet, it's also further limiting their ability to move them around or to, to come back and say, well, if they don't work here, let's put them over there. I think we have done a lot of work with the applicant here to get to a point where they are feeling comfortable that they have given something and we have also given something. But I remind everybody up here that really, as much as we're talking about what are we giving up, what we're also getting is we're getting an applicant who's willing to give us something better than the Poloni plan, which is already entitled to be built on tomorrow. And we all, I think, agreed that that was not the best use of the space. So if we want to come to an agreement on something better, we're going to have to continue to work on faith that the applicant who has come before us and shown us pictures and told us of walkability and trees and sidewalks and trying to make it a residential space for neighborhoods to be able to come together and people to be able to have dinner outside. Well, if that's the vision, we have to at least believe the applicant isn't trying to bamboozle us and then at the last second is going to turn around and give us something different. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't want to limit it further because I think that we're already in a good place where we've already given something and we've gotten something in exchange. If we go back again and we keep hammering at this, I think we're going to tie our own hands in some ways. If we say, oh, well, it has to be X number of feet, to Cliff's point, at some point we're going to have to deal with zoning and we're going to have to deal with other things. And if we limited ourselves at the 30,000 foot level, once we are actually doing site plan work, maybe we've made comp plan decisions that we now can't back ourselves out of because we've already hamstrung. So I would not want to change this at this stage. I think that the applicant has heard us loud and clear and understands that we have reservations, that we're thinking of the residents in the neighborhood, and that I believe he is also thinking of the residents in the neighborhood because he wants them to shop there. He wants to make it walkable for the residents. So I'm hesitant to do any more, especially since at the last meeting, we talked about the fact that it was a little unorthodox for us to be changing the comp plan in order to do this in the first place, but this is really at the PD level. So we've already kind of done something unorthodox. I would hate to make it, to do more of it.
Too, and I want to agree with you, Councilperson Hall Harris, is that, we've spent a lot of time on this. A lot of time. We've met with them, we've done a workshop, we had our first meeting and a continuance. And if they don't know by now how he feels, how I feel, how you guys feel, and what our concerns are, then there's a problem. And I think we've all laid out our cards, so it's for him to take that back, do what he has, present it to us, and then we just make a decision. Because I'm kind of tired of, let's get it on.
Well, in that vein, I'll make a motion.
To set the public hearing date.
Set the public hearing date for February 28th. Introduce the ordinance.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Guthrie?
Nay.
Councilmember Hall Harrison?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Wild?
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes?
Nay. Okay, so that comes back to us in 2 weeks. Thank you. Next order of business is a public hearing on Maitland West Lot 2, PD amendment. Laura, would you read the title, please?
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, amending the official zoning map, a part of Chapter 21 of the Maitland Code of Ordinances, by changing the zoning classification of property generally located south of State Road 414, Maitland Boulevard, north of Herbeson Drive and east of Albemarle Road, further described herein, from plain development to plan development, permitting development of a 6-story, 385 multifamily unit development, the Aspen at Maitland West, and associated site improvements on Lot 2 of Maitland West PD, and approvals for the plan development district classification, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you. Dan, would you please introduce the item?
So Mayor and Council, as you recall, this was introduced a couple weeks ago. The applicant is proposing a 385-unit apartment complex located on Lot 2 of Maitland West, which is just behind the Tiffany Apartments up here. They're at a density of about 40 units per acre. So the action to date so far, the DRC as well as P&Z both unanimously recommended moving this forward to council with a recommendation of approval subject to the conditions and findings outlined in the DRC report. And on January 24th, council unanimously introduced the proposed ordinance and set today for the public hearing date.
Okay, anybody have any questions of Mr. Mathis? Any discussion, any issues? If not, motion to be in order. We have the public hearing. Over here. So with the public hearing, anybody have any comments on this item? Please come to the podium and let us hear about it. Seeing none, let's close the public hearing. Motion to be in order.
I'll make the motion to recommend council adopt the proposed ordinance amending Lot 2 Maitland West Plan Development subject to the findings and conditions of approval outlined in the December 8th, 2021 DRC report.
Well said.
Oh, that's easy to try there.
All right. We have a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Lauren, please call the roll.
Councilmember Paul Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, next item is the consent agenda. Then we will remove any items from the consent agenda. Any public comments on any item number 3 through 9 of the consent agenda? Now's the time to address the council. Seeing none.
Nobody wants to talk about the one kind of GIS?
Yeah. I like that one.
Me too, I was stoked on that.
Okay, let's close the public hearing and the motion will be in order.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion is second for the consent agenda. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Paul Harrison.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, now is the time for the public period, where anybody can address any item that's not on the agenda. But please come to the podium if you have anything that's on your mind. Now is the time. All right, seeing none, let's close the Oh, we got one. Okay, good. Please come to the podium. Let us know your name and your address.
I don't move as fast as I usually
Well, you and me both.
do. Okay. Martha Brian Hall, 455 Lamar Lane. And I am here because I have been coming before this council, not you all, some of you, for 43 years. And we have not been heard. And my concern tonight is Kentucky Avenue. And that is behind Bellevue Park. It was deeded as a road, and it hasn't ever been created into a road. And Kim always knows about this because she has come back there years ago to discuss it with the residents. But I would like to see that road be open because on Brook Drive, when you drive on Brook, the tree roots are coming out of the road, and I have complained, I have called, but I have been told also that I'm the only one that complains, but I'm a taxpayer. And you all are supposed to do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. That is the reason you were elected to a council. So I would like for you all to do what is right for all citizens. Like you do for Dummer. I'm a taxpayer and have always been a taxpayer since the early 80s. I would also like to mention again riparian rights. for Brook Drive, 1630 Brook Drive. I have come before, and Attorney Shepherd is aware of that because he sent me a letter. I would like to have riparian rights also, like the people on the north. My next question, I would like for you all to, I have come before you all several times with Martin Luther King's holiday. That is a national holiday. Maitland, and it's shameful that Maitland does not honor Martin Luther King's holiday when the cities around you. And I noticed you all like to follow in Winter Park's footsteps and many things. I would like you to join Winter Park and Orlando and Altamont Hall to at least honor that as a legal holiday. Because I'm sure some of you, the residents and the families would like to be home with the children because the students are out, and I know the parents would love to be home with their kids. So those are my 3 points right now, but since COVID is getting better, I will be coming back with more issues that I have for my area, which we were still on dirt roads since 1887, and that is a disgrace. And you do get tax dollars. I would like for you all to treat all citizens the same as you do certain areas. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bradwell. All right, we have 3 items from Ms. Brian Hall. We can discuss those afterwards. Does anybody else have any comments for the public hearing? All right, let's go ahead and close the public hearing. We have a couple of decisions ahead of us. And active tonight, the ordinance is the Land Development Code. Laura, would you please read the ordinance title?
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, amending the Maitland City Code of Ordinances relating to an update of the City of Maitland Land Development Code with an associated repeal and replacement of obsolete sections of the Code of Ordinances, providing general provisions, providing for administration of development review, providing for zoning districts, providing for use regulations, providing for development standards, providing for subdivision standards, providing for public facility funding, providing for nonconformities, providing for enforcement, providing for definitions and rules for construction, interpretation, and measurement, deleting provisions that will become mute upon the adoption of the updated land development code, providing a severability clause, providing for conflicts, and providing for effective dates.
Okay, thank you very much. Dan, would you please introduce the item?
All right, I'll try to be shorter than Lori on this one.
You have the harder job.
All right, so here we are with the Land Development Code. This is a project. I'll give you a couple outlines of some of the milestones we've been at. At the workshop we had, we did a little bit more intensive presentation on what it all entailed. So just to remind you that we initially set out the RFQ back in December of 2018 as we had already transmitted the comp plan and we're anticipating its adoption. So this whole process has started back in 2018. The CDP was adopted in March of 2019, so shortly after that, the city retained Clarion Associates as our lead consultants, and we got them under contract in April of 2019. They took a lot of the information from us, the comp plan, the current ordinance, as well as a lot of the adopted plans that we've had in place, and read through all that, and a few months later they came down and had stakeholder interviews, and they met with everybody on council, they met with everybody on P&Z, and they met with Public Works Director, Community Development Director, City Manager, Assistant City Manager. They met with a lot of the senior staff. So in doing that, they then distributed back in October of that year a Land Development Code assessment to everybody. It gave us a couple months to look at it, and we had 2 workshops back in November, and the 2 days apart, one with P&Z and the next one with council the following day. And what came out of that workshop was council unanimously recommended that they liked the assessment and to move forward with it, but they, at the time, wanted to pull out the DM district and fast-track that. So the DM district was adopted in January of 2020 as a separate part. During that assessment, there was 5 main themes that were that came out of the overall assessment in the direction that was given to the consultant. Make it a more user-friendly code, implement the comp plan, modernize and simplify the code as it is, modernize the development standards to ensure consistency and bring them up to best practices, as well as add sustainable development standards. So the ordinance was written in several different modules, and they started distributing them to P&Z back in July of 2020. So P&Z reviewed module 1 in August, September, and October of 2020, module 2 a few months later, and then it was broken down into module 2B and 2C. So beginning in July of 2020 through May of 2021, P&Z extensively went through this document with staff, line by line, page by page, going over every regulation that was written. And in May of 2021, they issued 254 comments. They voted to issue 254 comments to the consultant to look at. So the consultant made those changes. We talked to. They then put us together an overall public workshop draft, which was staff reviewed it back in August and September, and that was key members of senior staff, public works, assistant city manager, community development department. We made sure everything was consistent, made sure we were adopting the best practices and the best chance and the most succinct and efficient way to actually implement this ordinance. And so we then had the joint P&Z council workshop on December 6th, and there was some discussion on some of the final refinements that came out of that meeting. So since that workshop, what you see in front of you, or what you have on the proposed ordinance now, is pretty much identical to what you saw at the workshop. There were about 6 or 7 changes that were made, and these came out of discussion that came out of council at that joint workshop, and that was the administrative adjustment section. There was language added that the immediately affected neighbors would also receive notification of any decision that was made, and they would outline the appeal process, so they had all the rights and due processes to appeal it before anything took effect. We also added in the procedures manual, in part of the application process, that a letter of no objection from immediate neighbors is something that we'd ask the applicant to submit when they apply for an administrative adjustment. We also, in the fences section, we amended the street side yard fences to pretty much mimic the way the side yard setback is. We heard from the council that there was some concerns about the restrictiveness of fences in the street side yards. We also heard comments about the EV parking, and so staff as well as the consultants increased the number of EV parking spaces for commercial and multifamily developments to 2 spaces plus 3 pre-wired spaces for the first 35 required parking spaces, and then 2 additional EV plus 3 additional pre-wired for every additional 75 parking spaces. We also clarified the language that the EV parking spaces for sustainability points must be in addition to the required spaces, so they can't double dip. Another change was in the IFAS. There was concerns at P&Z that IFAS, they had some concerns about the materials used for it. So in the original version that came to you at the workshop, it said that IFAS was a permitted use. It is now changed to a prohibited material except for architectural accents, like we did in the metal portions of buildings. It's now only for architectural accents. We also took out the permitted use of a clinic and laboratory use in GAP. That was an oversight that we found. Fixed a couple small typos in the West Side District table, and then updated the process for issuing and resolving stop work orders consistent with the Florida statutes. We heard that out of the workshop that was a concern, so we made sure we were up to date on the latest Florida statutes for issuing and resolving stop work orders. So what this all results in is it's a remarkable land development document that is fair, it's predictable, it puts together a set of rules that will help Maitland transform into this highly desired community that we are, while positioning us long-term for economic and sustainable development and sustainable future. And in doing this, it's implementing our community goals that we've established throughout the years, including the CDP, the Downtown Revitalization Plan, the Bicycle PED Master Plan, Parks and Rec Master Plan, West Side Development Plan, Sustainability Action Plan. Also, very importantly, those stakeholder interviews with council, P&Z, and staff. this code nails everything that those stakeholder interviews asked for, and then some. Then it also is very consistent with what ULI, the Technical Advisory Panel, recommended on how an ordinance should be on the website. So, action to date in January of this year, P&Z unanimously voted to forward the proposed ordinance to council with a recommendation of approval. And on January 26th, DRC also voted to forward the proposed ordinance to council with a recommendation of approval. With that being said, staff recommends council introduce the proposed ordinance amending the Maitland Land Code of Ordinances relating to the update of the Maitland Land Development Code and set a public hearing and action date for February 28, 2022. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Do we have any questions for?
I'll just start with saying congratulations to staff, to planning and zoning. I think we all know that this has been a monumental effort by a lot of people over a lot of years, and to get to this point, I think is a really remarkable thing. And I have done my level best to read all of it, and it is a really formidable document that I think brings us into a new era for our city, and I look forward to being able to have, vigorous debates going forward about how we implement things from the plan. So, thank you.
Yeah, this thing has got more scrutiny and discussion than the Declaration of Independence. And, I'm ready to add my kudos to the whole process, and particularly P&Z, who did yeoman's work. They really did, and they really ironed a lot of this out. And we had some nice finishing touches come from up here, so I'm ready to move on and adopt the staff recommendation.
Yeah, I would also like to echo that too. So,
Am I allowed to make a motion?
Well, don't we all have a discussion?
we have to.
Well, I thought we made a motion in a second, then we'll discuss.
Well, we can do that too.
Okay.
Everybody will have their.
However you want to do it is fine with me.
Well, if you feel the urge to move the motion.
I will make a motion to adopt this staff recommendation.
I still have questions about some of the things on there.
Okay, that's fine. But
Okay.
we can do that. We'll get around to it if we just want to take care of this motion first.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Kathy brings up a good point, which is public period. We put ourselves in a difficult. We should probably not move until we actually.
Sorry about
For the
that.
public first. Yes. And your instincts were right. Sorry. So go ahead.
Okay. And listen, I wanted to say the same thing. I watched on YouTube and attended all the meetings, and yeah, these guys, planning and zoning, worked hard on this, many hours. So, and I was one of them. I was on planning and zoning when this started up, so I have a good understanding of this. Spent a lot of time on it also, especially in the DM part of it. So, so I really want to give kudos to everybody, all of them. They just worked hours and hours. I mean, and they got nothing out of it. The only thing we gave them was a sandwich, right? So, thank you very much for your time and effort, everybody on planning and zoning. I just have some questions I wanted to ask, just to get some, so I know. On 3.26, the width of the single-family home used to be 75 feet. We've changed it to 50 feet. What's the thinking on that?
So the thinking is twofold. One of them with the residential districts, we had combined a lot of the districts. We went from, in the next ordinance, we'll talk about how many districts we went from to. So in consolidating districts, we wanted to eliminate any non-conforming uses. So we went to the lower district in cases, so there wouldn't be any non-conforming districts, plus the comprehensive plan, as well as, the comprehensive plan says that we need to be providing more types of housing units, more types of housing options for people. So we felt that also met the goal of the comprehensive development plan.
So I know we have some of the 50 feet lots on the west side. So does this permit somebody to say, come into Domrick or over there by the Enzian and buy a lot, split it if it's a 100-foot lot and build 2 50-foots.
If they could come in and meet all the requirements of the lot setback requirements, the road frontage access, all that stuff, and there's no deed restrictions or any HOA restrictions on it, then yes, they would have the right to apply for it, for a lot split.
So,
Stick with that.
I have concerns about it.
I just didn't know if you wanted to stick with that point or not. Just say, is that a good idea or not?
Well, I mean, seriously, I was waiting to see if anybody else had any kind of, thoughts about this stuff, and my thought is, is this really what we want to see in our city? I know we brought in some homes on the west side that already had those established, but, my thought is, or my concern is that, we're taking it from 75 to 50, that's a lot smaller. So I do have concerns with that. If anybody else here does, I'd like to hear your thoughts, or if you don't, hear your thoughts on it. And why,
So-
then we wouldn't worry about.
And if I could add to that, you're talking about, you said on 310, you're talking about the RSFD.
I think I have it on, it's the table, 3.26.
Correct, that's the RSFD, which is.
Yes, RSFD,
Which
sorry.
is single
correct.
family and duplex district. So in duplexes, yes, so you could have the fee simple duplex. Duplex is 50 feet width is not uncommon. There are no RSFD zoning districts anywhere in the Domrick area. There's a selected area where that RSFD actually sits. So-
But I mean, so say in Domrick, you couldn't do that because it's not an RSFD?
That's correct, correct.
It has to be those RSFD areas?
That's correct.
Okay, and then so just to make that, if you wanted to split something, you'd have to change the whole zoning map.
You have to change the whole zoning map, and then you're looking at a spot zoning in the middle of Domrick.
So that's something to take into consideration when we look at the map later on down the road. Okay. The downtown Maitland, one of the things that I've heard, and I think everybody here has heard from people is, and Dan, since day one, I think I've brought this to discussion, is everybody says to me, man, you go through Maitland on 1792, it feels like the buildings are right on top of you. So, I was looking at the setback to curb, and I don't know if I have that written down where that is. I think that's in the DM. I'm not sure which one, it's just 335 I have, I'm sorry. But it has that picture. I think there's 18 feet from curb, if I remember right, 18 feet from curb to the building.
It's actually 26 feet in the downtown.
Is it
because we have a
26?
10-foot parkway, an 8-foot sidewalk, and an 8-foot activity area required.
Okay, it's 26. I just wanted to bring that because that's what, what everybody, I mean, not just people in Maitland, but people I've talked to other places, they say, hey, listen, I go down there. But is that a standard that?
It is a standard in downtown. It's a standard that we adopted a year and a half ago that's, yes.
So mostly like if you go to any other downtown, it's pretty much 26 from curb to.
Oh, you mean is it standard all around downtown?
Is that pretty much what, yeah.
I think you'll find it more restrictive in some and less restrictive in other downtowns.
Drive down Orange Avenue in Orlando.
Yeah, they're right on
Well,
that.
so how would that relate to the frontage on MCC? I don't know if you know the frontage off the top of your head.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I get a sense that the Parker is a little more similar to what the standard would be.
Yeah. In fact, I think, I remember hearing that at Planning and Zoning, that's exactly what they did is what was required. And Dan and I talked about parking islands. I had a concern about parking islands. Thank you, Dan, for getting me straight on those. And one of the things that we were talking about is with parking islands. You see them all the time. You get out of your car and you have a little parking island. And talking to Dan, we're looking at doing bigger islands that will sustain bigger trees instead of getting out and all the plants are dead and some little 4-foot tree is in there starving to death. Question, and I was looking at on 43-2, the farmer's market. And just remind me, that what is the difference between the DM and the DMPD? Because farmers markets are not allowed in the DM, but they're allowed in the downtown Maitland PD. So just educate me on, you know, what would the PD downtown be compared to just the downtown?
So right now, there is no DMPDs. Right now, every PD is a PD that's existing downtown. So a DMPD is one that you would apply for after, well, since we haven't had a PD since the DM has been adopted, but it would be a new PD like taking advantage of the DICE program. That would be a DMPD. So that would be a very specific. What you're reading in that table is that farmers markets are not allowed in downtown unless they are co-sponsored by the city or part of the city program. Now you can ask for them by doing a DMPD and ask for the right to do a farmer's market, but just straight zoning by right, unless it's...
That was just kind of, that's where I was going with this. Are we violating our own?
No.
Okay. I didn't know if that was a slip or something or what, but, and the last one, and I'm just gonna say this. I know this is kind of crazy and we've been talking about this, but, and I've asked Dan this, houseboats, we allow houseboats on our lakes. But is that another thing that somebody could do Airbnb on? Even though it's illegal, I know, but I mean, why do we even need houseboats on our lake? Why does that need to be in our land development code?
Houseboats have been in our land development code for about 30 years. They've been permitted. And we have yet, since I've been here, yet to see a houseboat in here. But as far as your question about an Airbnb, no, because you can only have one dwelling unit per lot. So the houseboat, you couldn't live in the houseboat or reside in there if there's a single family house there as well. So you couldn't have those two dwelling types on a single lot. So it either have to be a vacant lot in a houseboat, or it have to be a house and then a boat that's used as a boat offshore, not parked in there and used as an Airbnb.
Yeah, I just don't know why we even have it on there. I just thought it was kind of something we could just take out. I mean, you know, what is everybody going to do? Start getting houseboats and go over to Dog Island and sit around Dog Island on their houseboats? And
we haven't seen that in the last 30 years, but nothing's out of the...
yeah. And here's the last one, and I talked to Dan about this today, and guys, I do kind of have a problem with this one. This is one of the ones and I wanted to see how everybody else here feels. So, on 254, we're doing 20%. And this is not from ULI, this is recommended from staff, correct? 25% on changing modifications on buildings and homes. And I don't have a problem with homes doing setbacks and such like that, but when it gets to the bigger buildings and you're doing 25%, that's kind of really large. And then in the office building part, it's up to 50%. So anything below 50%, they can do without it coming through the process. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
Want to get a little clarity?
Yeah, it was one of the things that ULI CAP study said that they really liked, is having that flexibility in the west side. When you get into a community that is as built out as we are, and we're getting into a reuse redevelopment phase of the city, it's very important to have that flexibility. It's not uncommon to have 25% in jurisdictions that are as built out as we are. We've seen Oviedo has 25% in theirs, and they're not near as built out as we are. But it is not uncommon. And we asked a consultant to look around the country, and they said absolutely it is not uncommon for a jurisdiction at this level of build out and reuse redevelopment that 25% is good. It provides the flexibility. It provides a good way to use land that's not otherwise easily used without going through the variance process. And it's something, and the 25% is only for specific things. It's dimensional requirements. So you're talking about things like the lot width, the front yards, the setbacks, the maximum height, and the setback encroachment. So it's not something that we can just go in and say any standard that's in the code we're gonna say 25% we're gonna waive. But in addition to that, there are a lot of standards that an applicant has to go through to get that administrative adjustment. There are very specific standards of review that I have to follow, or whoever precedes me has to follow, in order for someone to justify getting that. And the administrative adjustments are all based on how it affects the adverse effects on adjacent properties, and which is why at the workshop there was comments about we need to make sure they're notified, we need to make sure they're aware of the appeal process, we need to make sure they're notified when there's an application in there. So it's all about protecting the adjacent property while still allowing some flexibility of not having to go through the variance process. Things like to protect a tree, things like if there's a pool equipment that has to fit in there, or an air conditioning unit that has to be a minimum of 3 feet away from the house, but the house is close to the setback, rather than going through the variance process and making it pay $300 and going through a 3-month process where we're going to deny it because it doesn't meet the strict standards of a variance. This allows the flexibility, and I think you'll hear, we've been hearing from homeowners as well as businesses that this is something that they are really fond of and hope this moves forward, because there are some that are out there now that are writing on the ability to have that flexibility.
Right, and like I said, I don't have a problem with, the residential. It's kind of more the commercial. So, one of the things in there was stacking. So, let's say there is one day some drive-throughs, or the drive-throughs that are existing, and they come and they go, listen, we want to put a couple more cars. We want to build this to make stacking a little more. And I think you have up to 40% for that. So if they have a stacking of 20, they can add another 5 cars or 6 cars. That's kind of, that's kind of a big difference right there.
Right, and let me explain that. This is not stacking of cars in the drive-through. This is stacking lane distance for vehicular surface area. So this is like if you have a parking garage and you have a paved booth to get in there. It's the stacking distance between that and the street. It's the stacking distance between getting into the shopping center and getting to the use that requires the stacking. It's not the individual stacking for the use. It's the drive aisle that leads up to the principal use that you're getting into. You'll have shopping centers, for instance, Maitland Concourse North, Trelago Way would be the stacking lane. It's not the stacking of the use that goes inside whatever development comes out of there, but it's the stacking lane distance for the Trelago Way before you get to the principal use that I think you're thinking that's what the stacking is, but this is the vehicular distance, surface area distance for the stacking lane, not the actual use.
Okay. Yeah, but that was just one of my concerns, that, these are the things that I've seen in, the 50%. So just wanted to bring to people's attention, see if anybody else had any concerns or.
Dan came prepared for that 25% question.
I think it's kind of much required.
I think we've been talking about that.
He's got a slide.
So I think it's going to be more. I think Dan's going to be in a more tricky, and like you said, whoever's in that position, but
yeah,
that homeowner thing is, I think, the one that actually gets trickier. I'm on the opposite of you. I think that the decision making of taking that 7.5-foot setback to reduce it by 25%, I think that's going to be a more interesting case than
So is there notice of the neighbors, and the neighbors can deal with the staff?
So I think Dan and I talked about that months ago now, and you put procedures in place for notifying. Because my concern was that this could go administratively, and a neighbor wouldn't know that this request was even being made. So.
Well, if Dan does something we don't like, we can fire Sharon, so.
Well, what, in my discussion with Dan, I said, listen, it's not even Dan. I mean, Dan could leave tomorrow and it's somebody else. So, I mean, I trust Dan all day long, but it's.
I think they're going to behave. I don't think anybody in staff's going to do something crazy, because
We all have consistent standards to follow.
Because those people who they get mad will be calling us, not them, and so I trust them to behave responsibly.
I think these are. I think this code. And I really said a lot of times we put into it. I think there's still going to be things that we'll learn from, and there are going to be, elements of this code that when they're tested through an application or whatever, there are probably gonna be things that need to be tweaked, and that's just the nature of adopting a new code and living with it and knowing that there's things. So I think it's hard now, it's such a big document, to tackle it in this forum is awkward, but I do think that there's opportunities as things come up that we're just gonna have to potentially deal with little issues here and there that I'm sure things will come up. I mean, that's just the nature of doing a full code rewrite.
Yeah, I know that kind of got us in, we got to be very careful with that. I remember the truck, right? In one part it said one this, and the other part it said that. So when we do the rewrites, yeah, we need to be very careful how we rewrite the code.
Commercial vehicles.
Commercial vehicle, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Not truck. I got mine in the truck. That's fine.
Anybody else have any?
Can I make
Open it up to the public period. Anybody from the public want to address the land development code?
Yeah, Dale McDonald, 108 Tangelo. Pardon me, I lost my key fob earlier today, so got a little slow getting here. My apologies. On this particular agenda item, I've got large indigestion, up to 25%, dimensional flexibilities, and Sharon knows that this was in Clifton's. This was an aggressively argued moment to go to where we are today. And somehow we managed to survive all this time with 5% wiggle room. And another question was raised to me today, and I was not as aware, with all this dimensional flexibility that would go with the community development director or the city manager's designee, that what becomes of our board of zoning adjustments? Do we still apply for variances, or is right at the altar of the community development director? So again, with that level of flexibility, that covers a multitude of potential sins. So I was just curious functionally how that would work. You and I probably could talk specifically about that. So do we just retire BZA? Thanks again.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. Does anybody else have any comments on land development code? Now's the time. Public period is coming to a close. It's closed public period. Bring it back up for, I assume, Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the staff recommendation. Do I have to say more than that?
That can be your motion as you give the staff recommendation.
He's going to introduce it instead of public hearing date for February 28th.
Yeah, that's what he meant to say.
I heard that. But
Yeah.
Mr. Wild's got good ears, so,
Okay, we have a motion. Waiting for a second.
Second.
Okay, the motion is second. Now it's time for any further discussion. Do we have any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, Laura, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wild,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison,
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas,
aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. All right, we'll see this back in 2 weeks as well. Next item is ordinance to amend the official zoning map consistent with the land development code. And this map is never left.
This is what Lori's going to read a lot.
No, we're going to read the long title first, okay? Please read the title.
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, amending the official zoning map of the City of Maitland to conform to the updated City of Maitland Land Development Code. By amending the zoning district boundaries and changing the zoning map classification of properties as follows. Privately owned properties currently zoned RS-1 and RS-1A, single-family residential district, changed to RSF1, residential single-family 1 district. City-owned properties currently zoned RS-1 and RS-1A, single-family residential district, changed to GAP, Government Arts and Public District. Privately owned properties currently zoned RS-2, RS-3, temporary district R1-AA, single-family residential districts and temporary districts C3 commercial districts, except for property known as the King of Kings Evangelical Lutheran Church, changed to RSF-2 residential single-family 2 district. City-owned properties currently zoned RS2 and RS3 single-family residential district, changed to Government Arts and Public District. Privately owned properties currently zoned RS-5, single-family residential district, changed to RSF-3, residential single-family 3 district. City-owned properties currently zoned RS-5, single-family district, single-family residential district, to Government Arts and Public District. Privately owned properties currently zoned RS-D and RS-D1, residential, single-family, and duplex districts, changed to RSFD, residential, single-family, and duplex districts. City-owned properties currently zoned RS-D and RS-D1, residential, single-family, and duplex district, changed to Government, Arts, and Public District. Privately owned properties currently zoned RG-2 and RG-3, multifamily residential district, changed to R-MF, residential multifamily district.
Page 2.
I'm not making that motion.
City-owned properties currently zoned RG-2 and RG-3, multifamily residential district, changed to Government Arts and Public District. Privately owned properties currently zoned PO-1, PO-2, PO-3, professional office district, RSF-4, single-family residential district, RG-1, multifamily residential district, and the property known as the King of Kings Evangelical Lutheran Church, currently zoned temporary district R1AA, changed to MX mixed multifamily district. City-owned properties currently zoned PO1, PO-2, PO-3, professional office districts, RSF-4, single-family residential district, and RG-1, multifamily residential district, changed to Government Arts and Public District. Privately owned properties currently zoned OC, OC-1, and OC-3, office commercial districts and temporary district R-1, single-family residential, changed to WS-RT, West Side Research Technology Subdistrict, and WS-NM, West Side New Market Subdistrict. City-owned properties currently zoned OC, OC-1, and OC-3, office commercial district, changed to Government Arts and Public District. Privately owned properties currently zoned CC, cultural corridor district, except for the Civic Center property, changed to MX, mixed multifamily district. City-owned property and the Civic Center property currently zoned CC, cultural corridor, changed to GAP, Government Arts and Public District, establishing and assigning a CHA-O cultural, history, and arts overlay upon these properties, currently identified in the 1994 master plan as City of Maitland Cultural Corridor Special District, providing instructions to the city clerk, repealing all conflicting ordinances and providing a severability clause, and providing for an effective date.
Not one stumble, great
That's
job.
why Ms. Maria retired.
She did that. She did.
Make the right decision.
That's the judge who should have had to get hired right there.
Okay. Now, Dan, can you beat that?
All right, I want to hear Councilman Thomas read that as his recommendation.
I move the motion.
So here we are. This is the amendment that will make the official zoning map consistent with the Land Development Code update. And in doing so, we took the original Maitland Comprehensive Development Plan. As you guys know, we condensed those districts down into 8, and we wanted to do something consistently with our numerous zoning districts and even our temporary zoning districts. So what we did is we took the existing zoning district map that had 24 zoning districts down to 12 base districts and 1 overlay district. So it essentially goes from that to this, and I'll explain to you a little bit more in just a second. Action to date, in January, P&Z as well as DRC both unanimously recommended to forward this to council with a recommendation approval consistent with the comprehensive development plan. Now, P&Z did have one amendment in their recommendation, and that was to change Dog Island, I believe it was RSF1, to GAP. They wanted it the Government Arts and Public District because it was owned by the state, and with the lease by the city, they wanted to make sure that it was under the GAP district. Staff DRC concurred with that recommendation. We were okay with that, so our recommendation follows P&Z's. So staff is recommending council introduce this amendment to the official zoning map consistent with the Land Development Code and update, and set the public hearing for February 28, 2022. Now with this, would launch the, once this is adopted, it will launch the official GIS layer of the interactive zoning map. So this will be available to the public as soon as it gets launched. And what it'll do is it'll allow people to go in and take a look at any property within the city. They can click on any property. It'll tell them their current zoning. It'll tell them their all their setbacks, their lot dimensions, lot widths, what their previous zoning was. It'll also tell them if there's been any variances approved on the site. It'll give them access to the approved variance that came out of it. In addition, if the property is in, like say, a planned development, you can go in there and it'll tell you the name of the planned development, and it'll link you to the planned development approved documents. So all of this will be at the fingertip of the applicants, the customers, the citizens, as well as staff. We have loaded every variance case that's been in the history of the city. We've loaded all the PDs in there, all the site plans of the PDs. There's also a line item for administrative adjustment, so anytime there's anything that happens to the land that runs with the land, it'll be recorded in here so that anybody, whether it's a citizen, council, customer, staff, at their fingertip 24/7 can go in there and get all the information on that property. This will be launched as soon as the zoning map is adopted, so we hope that you adopt it shortly, and we hope that you set the public hearing and action date on it for February 28, 2022. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Quick dumb question. Is there any way we can incorporate that mechanism where you can click on a lot and see everything? Is there any way you can incorporate, like if you're going to use
Satellite view?
Use your powers to let me build my fence 25% over here instead of over there? Can those sort of variances under the 25% threshold be included in something like that, so when they click on it, they can be aware of any nearby changes?
So all variances are loaded in here, and this line here for the administrative adjustments, anytime an administrative adjustment is approved, it'll be loaded in here as well. So if you click on a property,
Can you load it in advance so they can be aware of it before it's approved?
so we do have a interactive public hearing map also that's live now that anybody can go in there and click on anything that's under a public hearing or anything that's under a site plan review. They can click on it, they can find out when the meeting is, what the meeting is about, whether it's P&Z council, if it's an introduction or adoption.
But I mean, as far as, and getting back to what Mike said about making sure people are notified,
We could absolutely add that layer to that
I
interactive
think
development.
adding that layer to that, so if Vance is thinking of sticking his fence closer to my house, and you're gonna let him do it, I can click on his lot and see beforehand.
Yeah, we could definitely add that layer to that. You would be notified because that's part of the new code, is that we notify you. But we will put it on that interactive map.
If that's an easy add to do.
Absolutely, we'll make it happen.
Yes.
Everything's easy.
And furthermore,
Anybody else? Questions? Mike, do you have one?
It's not a question, I just want to say how cool this is. I play around with GIS stuff a lot in my day job, and I'm so excited to look at this. For fun.
Dan, can you put the map back up for me, please? And you got a question under right there by Greenwood Gardens, I think. Yeah, the red. What's allowed there and what's prohibited? I mean, what's allowed? I mean, 6 stories, 5 stories, 3 stories.
Over here?
Well, the whole street right there, except for that one little piece of gray, yeah, everything that lines Greenwood Gardens.
So it would allow for, and we'd have to look at the exact use table, allow for a mixture of office and low-end commercial, like office and commercial type uses. The CDP caps it at a maximum height of 3 stories on Maitland Avenue and 4 stories on Maitland Boulevard. So that's pretty much what you can use. The code says that you can apply for townhouse or apartments as well, but that requires a PD. It would require them to go through the PD process, so they're not allowed by height to do that.
Good, so those neighbors will never have to worry about, oh, I'm getting intense, people living here, 6 stories.
No, and there's still the residential neighborhood compatibility standards that says as you get closer to the traditional neighborhood, future land uses, you have to taper down. So
right.
There are protections in that sense. There's protections in the fact that they would have to go through the public hearing to put any kind of multifamily there. But office and commercial there's a lot of uses in that use table in Article 4 that would tell you what type of specific uses are allowed.
Now, on Wymore, I've heard a couple of things, especially King of Kings, it was said that it was going to be RSF2, and then it changed to, and then I heard something else. So just give me the whole, what's allowed on that height and density, and what's, is that okay?
I mean, it's fine, yeah, but I mean, we're really just adopting the map. I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with it.
Well,
it's going to be what it is, right?
It's going to be what it is. So when we put together the zoning map, we consolidated a lot of the zoning districts, and so we gave it the comparable zoning district. In a case like this, where it wasn't a one-for-one identical, we gave it the comparable use to what is actually there, or what is immediately adjacent to it. So like you indicated, this is an RSF2 county zoning at the time. It is a church in a whole row of MX districts. Nobody is going to build a single-family house on I-4, and so therefore, because it's not single-family right now, we gave it a consistent adjacent use zoning district.
right, with the height of 3 stories?
The height in this area, I believe, is 5. I'd have to go back and look at that, but yeah, outside of the Maitland corridor, it's either 4 or 5.
And that's already set in stone, the 5 stories.
It's set with the land development code if it's adopted, and I'll look that up real quick while you're asking other questions.
Well, that's all I have, but I was just wondering about that. It's, that's 5 stories over there. I have some angry people, some angry neighbors. Thank you. That's all I got.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, let's open it up to the public period. Anybody from the public like to address the council on this, or just be heard on this? Any else? There we go.
My thumb is going to come up. I have a question. Martha Bryan Hall, 455 Amana Lane. So you have changed the zoning from the land development code, the regular zoning, like a residential R18, all of that has been changed to PD.
Not to PD, but
I mean, land development, you have changed the regular zoning, what people, homes or resident, I mean.
You kind of collapsed a few of the different categories into one.
Repeat that.
They've collapsed a few of the categories into one. Maybe if you ask a couple of good questions and we can ask.
I'm sort of confused there because, I see the map has been changed and I know you all had the workshops. For instance, my home was R1A. So R1A has been changed to, are you doing that PD R1A or how would that be?
Dan, you
So this is going from R1A to RSF2. I think what Ms. Bryant is referring to is the property around her has got a pending application right now for a PD. But her property is proposed to be RSF2, which is the comparable.
All right, when was that done? When was the zoning changed?
The zoning has not been changed.
Also, now this is what you all are working on in order to change it.
Correct.
And now, when would the citizens be notified?
If the council moves it forward, there'd be a public hearing on the 28th.
So you all did not have a workshop for the residents in the city to be involved with these?
Well, so Planning and Zoning Board had a public hearing, and which was advertised. And they forwarded the recommendation. DRC also had a public meeting that heard recommended the zoning map as well. So council, if they move it forward tonight, there will be an advertised public hearing for the February 28th.
Okay, a lot of this went fast, for, especially during COVID, and I'm sure many other residents will be concerned about this also. Thank you.
Good evening, 455 from Mother Lane, Maria Brand. You said that residents it was advertised. How was it advertised?
So the zoning map was advertised in the local paper, which is required by the statute.
And that's the only way?
It was on the website, because it's a city-wide zoning, we don't post every property in the city. It's done through, in that respect, it's done through newspaper general circulation, it's done on the website, it's also posted out here in the library.
Okay. So those 4 entities, correct?
And in a citywide zoning, correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so anybody else? Address the council. Okay. Let's close the public hearing then. I think that has probably got the answers to the questions. And you're free to talk to us, or free to talk to Dan afterwards and kind of get a little better sense of where this has been and where it's headed. So, is there any further discussion among us? If not, there a motion to be in order?
Is this, so is this the first of two?
Yes, there'll be a public hearing on the 28th. So,
Okay.
and to answer your question earlier, the height on that area would be 35 to 45 feet, depending on what the use was.
So 3 to 4 stories?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's it's different than 5 or 6, so.
It is, yes.
Okay. How we all feel about this?
Feeling good, I'm just gun shy about making motions.
There's a slide.
Move to propose the ordinance amending the official zoning map and set the public hearing and action date of February 28, 2022.
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you read the roll, please?
Councilmember Guthrie?
I will say, just for discussion for the next meeting, aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison?
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas?
Aye.
Councilmember Wild?
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes?
Aye. Okay. All right, we have another item of business here, which is the appointments to the canvassing board. We have one council member, one citizen member, and one alternate citizen member. Laura, would you do the
Yes, for West Western Council, to appoint 1 citizen member, 1 alternate member, and 1 member of council to the canvassing board. for the March 8th, 2022 Maitland general election. Requirements would be the supervisor elections on the afternoon of Tuesday, March 8th, and then again on Friday, March 11th. In the event of a runoff, there will be an additional date to be determined. We've had 2 applications for citizens interested in being appointed, and that is Gray Binford and Doris.
Okay.
And we're taking volunteers from.
Right, so why would we need an alternative for the citizen member, not for the council member?
Well, we like just to plan ahead in case the person ends up having something that pulls them away from not being able to fulfill it, or we have to plan for COVID now in case someone would come down and ill before the time they needed to serve. We have a backup in place.
Okay, and I guess what I was asking, do you think it's a good idea to also have a alternative council?
I think the reasoning's been in the past because you have to appoint the citizen members, but we can pick up the phone. John said, like, I can't make it, we can pick up the phone and call Lindsay, whereas we can't appoint the citizen members.
Okay, all right.
But a backup plan may not be better.
Yeah. All right, so the qualifications are an ability to count and an ability to...
I move that we put Councilmember Vance Guthrie on the canvassing board.
We're going to have a nomination.
Where the hell did that come from?
You
Should I want to second that?
You have a very well
I don't have my calendar on me, so I
It's
can't
like
say.
2 o'clock on Tuesday and 3 o'clock on Friday.
It's all weekdays?
Yeah.
It's Tuesday, March 8th, beginning at 3 p.m., and Friday, the 11th at 2 p.m.
And I'm going to say yes right now, but then, you know what? If not, we'll just let, Sharon call one of you guys up and.
The retaliation should have been that you would have appointed Mike.
Well, that's already had it in my mind.
I want to be on council.
And you have to be able to count, so.
That rules me out.
Meetings with this one.
You won't need to know how to count.
We have a nomination. Does everybody have a second on that?
Lindsay's second and I thirded it.
Oh, you did very quickly. All right.
It's happening.
Wow, it's a thing already. All right, well, let's go to the citizens. We have 2, Doris Cup and Ms. Benford.
Yes.
Thank them, that's awesome to step up.
Yeah, it really is. It is a huge help for having people that are interested in doing this kind of work. It's really benefits us all. So thank you, both of them, for having availability. Do we have a nomination for either of them, or one or two? One, the other being the alternative?
What do you say?
He nominated both of them.
My consideration is only to put in their application first, and Doris has put in hers before Ms. Binford, so that's the only thing I have to go on.
Second.
Okay.
So is the nomination for Doris as the primary? And, okay, all right. And 1 and 2, we have a third on that one?
Yeah, third.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Ms. Huck and Ms. Binford, and thank you, Councilman Guthrie. We'll have, there's at least a couple of people in the room tonight that are interested in this.
I've done it twice.
All right. Okay, well, I think, what else do we have this evening? That was pulled, resolution. Discussion, anybody have any discussion items?
I have an idea I'd like to share for one of the first Fridays. Since April's Tartan month, I think have a Celtic little band up there, Irish or a good Scottish band for the night, and have a competition of everybody in kilts. This one I wanted to throw out there. If you're listening, Mr. Sergeant.
Right.
It's an idea.
All right.
Yeah. I got a kilt for you.
Now, look, nobody wants to be put through that.
All right. Well, I'm not going to touch that with a
Can we make masks fully optional from now on?
That's the first Friday?
After today, can we remove signs that say masks encouraged, which makes you want to wear following the encouragement of our staff.
Well, I mean, it is optional, it is. It's been optional for months.
I'm not, it's the rules for, you know, I'm just not a fan of posting a sign and then not obeying the rule where you post.
It's the vague one that says we encourage. I don't think it says required. I'll double check it, but it's the same for employees as well. They don't have to wear it, we're not enforcing it. You drop that policy.
And you only want to encourage, so.
No, I'm being a baby about it, but I just, when you put up a sign, I feel like if I sit up here, I should just obey my own sign. Because that's just my only. But I'm ready to move on from that. But I understand all the sensitivities around it as well. So I'm just.
Okay. I hear you. Anybody else? Anything else? Any reports, Mr. City Attorney?
Yes, just briefly, I was asked about the status of our favorite and only lawsuit, DeCat Court, and I copied you all on a motion to dismiss, and I hope you all got it. I only learned tonight that one of the council people it found its way to junk mail. I hope that's not true for all of you. I hope the rest of you got it too. I would understand why your own email servers would consider it junk. It's a lawyer who wrote a bunch of paperwork. But it was done, it was filed, and we are now setting a hearing. And when that happens, I will let you know. We have a new judge, and I would expect similar results, not because I know anything about the judge, but because the law has not changed from last time we told them this does the court. And so if you have any questions about what you saw or what you read, be free to, happy to answer them. I cannot tell you with quite the level of certainty that I had last time that it would be dismissed, but I still have a pretty high degree of confidence that some or all of it should be dismissed.
Okay. You don't have a hearing date?
We do not have a hearing date yet.
All right. How about, did you ever hear back on the bid bond?
Actually, no, which is super weird to me. But again, the longer we have the money and they don't, that's all good.
Okay. All right. City Manager, any reports? Council members have already had their shot at it. All right. Okay, then we're adjourned.
Get us down for 2 hours with that agenda.
Cliff, I will see you Thursday night. It should be a fun time.
Hardly wait.
Yeah.